I want to begin by acknowledging that I am in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. Their inherent rights to this land were recognized in the peace and friendship treaties, which Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, and Passamaquoddy people signed with the British Crown from 1725 to 1779. This series of treaties did not surrender Indigenous land, resources, or sovereignty to the British Empire, but instead established rules for an ongoing relationship between multiple nations. The treaties were later reaffirmed by Canada in Section 35 of the Constitution Act in 1982, and they remain active to this day. The Nova Scotia College of Social Workers joins our members and our communities in the necessary labor of reconciliation. We are grateful to live and work together as treaty people in Mi'kma'ki. Without action, acknowledgements are empty. Whether you are with us in Mi'kma'ki or joining us from elsewhere, please consider whose territory you are in, your relationship with that land, and your relationships with the Indigenous peoples who have lived and continue to live in that place. We invite you to reflect on how each of us as individuals and as a collective body of social workers can hold ourselves accountable to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples here and across Turtle Island. Bulaliu, thank you all. We also want to take this moment to recognize African Nova Scotians as a founding people. Nova Scotian social workers and the people they work with and walk alongside have diverse origins: Indigenous, arrivant, settler, and refugee. In February, we specifically recognized the deep history of communities of African descent and the 50 African Nova Scotian communities that exist throughout the region to this day. These communities have enriched this region with their labor, culture, and creativity for over 400 years. They have been and continue to be pivotal in shaping our society. Advancing Indigenous sovereignty and Black liberation are deeply and inextricably tied. As social workers, the values of our profession demand that we commit ourselves to continually learning more about how we can deeply engage and move forward the work of truth, reconciliation, and equity for all people. Recognition marks the beginning of the work ahead of us, not the end. I want to take this moment also to thank our panelists, Senator Dr. Wanda Thomas Bernard from Dalhousie University, who of course needs no introduction. We are so grateful to her for being such a powerful social work leader in our community. We are also so grateful to Dr. Anita Rachel Ewan, social work professor from the University of Guelph and Humber, and Dr. Delores Mullings, Vice Provost of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism from Memorial University. So our panelists have been asked to, we had asked everyone to write up some questions as part of the coming together for this panel. And here are a few questions that we have compiled. Why did you choose to write this book? What were some challenges in your mentorship process? Tell us what Africentric social work means to you. Why is it important? Why should it be important to non-African, Caribbean, and Black peoples in the audience? What can social workers do in their everyday work to counter resistance to Africentric social work? Did you have opportunities to mentor and be mentored along the journey? And what are some important considerations going forward for implementing Africentric social work in schools of social work and in practice? So these are just a few of the questions regarding this book. I also want to take this opportunity to let everyone know, we hope everyone already has this book. In case you haven't, we are going to actually be having a couple of door prizes for some of our many social work events, and we will be gifting some lucky social workers this textbook. So stay tuned. But for now, I want to begin by inviting Dr. Senator Wanda Bernard Thomas to please begin by answering some of these questions for us.
Well, let's start with the first question. Why did we do this book? And I'm probably the best position to answer that. I want to hold up the book, first of all. We're just so proud of it. And thank you, Nadia, for inviting us here today to talk about the book and to promote it, because we want people to use the book, read it, use it in many different ways. The idea of this book really was a seed that was planted at the Nova Scotia Association of Black Social Workers 35th anniversary conference in 2014. So it truly has been a labor of love that has been developed over this period of time. The book, the significance of this book and the coming together of the book really, I think, is a testament to how marginalized Afrocentric perspectives are in social work. And just to give you a little example of that, back in 1999, I introduced the first course in Canada on Africentric social work at Dalhousie University as an elective. And the course was developed based on a research project that I led that was exploring Afrocentrism in social work, because we were so marginalized in social work in Nova Scotia. And it even dates back, you can go back 20 years before that, when the Association of Black Social Workers started in Nova Scotia by 4 of us in 1979. We came together as a group, we formed the organization because social workers and institutions of social work in Nova Scotia, they were not meeting the needs of the African Nova Scotian communities. So as social workers, as Black social workers and community workers, we came together, and as 4 people, we were quite a formidable force. No one knew we were only 4, but we knew that we were stronger together. But you can see from this history, you can see how long it's taken for us to bring an African-centered social work perspective from the margin to bring it forward. And that was always the dream. I want to thank and commend my colleague, Dr. Delores Mullings, for really taking charge of this book project and bringing it to fruition, because through her leadership, we now have this awesome product. I'll stop there and pass the torch to my co-panelists.
Thank you so much. And so I am going to invite Dr. Ewan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. And thank you, Anne, for that wonderful introduction. I just wanted to make a slight, edit. My main institution is Red Deer Polytechnic, and I teach part-time at the University of Gulf Humber, just to get that out of the way. I think that I was compelled to answer the same question as Senator Dr. Wanda, because it was an amazing opportunity for me. And I think that I bring an alternative perspective. So for those that did read the text, I focused on the social construction of baby mamas. And that chapter was inspired by my lived experience. And as I was discussing this panel with N, I shared with them that a lot of the discussion that I bring today will be coming from a client lens, because I have many years of history being a client, and that's what inspired me to get into this field. Another question, in an extension to that response that I provided, that I really want to answer is, what does Afrocentric social work mean to me? And as I was thinking about this, so many things came to mind, so many amazing things came to mind, but the one thing that was solidified for me was protection. Prior to understanding what Afrocentric social work meant, or, I always had it's inherent to me because I am African, of African descent. But now, like, it's such a relief and that it's here and it's present and it's making its way into the field in many ways now, because now I know that there are many clients who are more protected than they were prior to this coming about. I remember being a client and having to always prove myself or argue or validate things that I was saying. But now that we have this framework, I feel like it's protecting a lot of the African clients that we will work with and have worked with and will continue to work with alongside our colleagues as well, because they bring so much to the field and they no longer have to fight to bring what they're bringing into the field. So I'll leave it at that. And once again, thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Mullings.
Yeah, thanks, Nadia. I'm really happy. I've had a few conversations with NSASW. Is it NSASW? I think I put some extra letters in there, but I think you get where I'm going.
We're NSCSW.
NSCSW. I'm thinking about my heartbeat. And I'm always happy to have dialogue with your membership. So I'm going to go back to the question about why this book. I went back to what I call social work school as a mature adult. And I had specific ideas about what going back to school would mean. But when I got to social work school, I did not see myself in the courses, in the literature. And I'll say this, I had Dr. Pat Danzer at McMaster University was my only Black prof throughout the entire program and throughout my entire university experience. And Dr. Danzer lit a fire under me in one of the courses that I had with her. She was the person that started critiquing multiculturalism and what it meant. And I thought, and she also introduced me to the literature around the domestic scheme. Prior to that, I had been a grown adult by then. I had no idea, but I also thought, holy moly, I don't see myself in here. I don't see anybody I know, nobody in my family. And I thought, I need to do something to change this. I need to help to do something to change this. And my outlook when I decided, to be a part of this book was really trying to bring in that piece about really needing to do something about social work education and social work practice. Because as I went along and witnessed practice and also experienced and witnessed education, I just knew that we had to have something to showcase the agency and experiences and the strength and the challenges of people of African descent. And so that's just a little part of why I think that, for me, that book was important. I remember Senator, I used to, almost every time we have a conversation, I'm like, we need to write a book. We need to write a book. We need to write a book. And you've always said, we've had dialogues about that, but boy, oh boy, me too. It's always on my desk. I'm just really happy that we have our book, but the colors match. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Can I pick up on a point that Dr. Mullings made? And I think Dr. Ewan also sort of alluded to this. And that's sort of the absence and the erasure of our experiences And so as social work students, if we don't see ourselves reflected in the curricula, then that impacts then, what we learn, how we learn, and then what we take into the field. And then I was really moved, Dr. Ewan, by your comment about being a client. And that's what drove you into social work. And I'm just so proud to hear about your journey, because that speaks volumes. It really speaks volumes about you, about your strengths. But I think it also speaks volumes about us as people of African descent, that willingness to sort of keep moving. When I studied social work, it feels like, 2 lifetimes ago now. But when I was studying social work, we didn't learn anything about the strengths of people of African descent. And when I think about the title for our session today, Opportunities and Challenges, we certainly, in Canada, we certainly had a blank sort of a blank page in terms of trying to make sure that we were bringing forward more perspectives of what it means to be a person of African descent in Canada. We have lots from America, we have lots from Britain, but what do we have from Canada? This is really the first text that we have from Canada.
Absolutely. And I just want to affirm what Dr. Senator Thomas Bernard has said, because I just recently completed my doctorate in 2020, and there was only one Black social work professor that I was able to interact with, but they were on their way to retirement. So I was so fortunate to connect with Dr. Mullings and have their guidance. And if it wasn't for Dr. Mullings, I don't know how I would have completed the degree. And it was so tense in my program that I had 2 internal individuals that were on my committee, but I really had to seek outside for that support, because it's, essentially, I don't want to say non-existent, but we have to find it in other ways. So like I said, it was such an honor to have Dr. Mullins help me through my journey, and not only as an academic mentor, but just a holistic mentor. And so many, I can give Dr. Mullins so many titles, but I'll just leave it at that. And yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I wonder if I could pick up on that mentorship piece, because, if you watch some of these videos that I do, you will hear me saying the same things all the time. And I think it's important, because when celebrities talk, or when people talk about history, you hear the same thing over and over. You sometimes hear the same negative things, and you hear the positive things. So my history, you're going to hear it over and over. So this mentorship piece, so Dr. Bernard Thomas, in her mentorship, she has, my mother has laid the foundation for me, but I'll tell you, the academic mothering that Senator Bernard Thomas did with and for me is like, you cannot write it, and people will say, you can't make that story up. you just can't. People will be like, what? And what I want to say is, although I didn't call upon her every single day, I could have, if I needed to. I'll tell you a very quick story, and then I'll come back to Dr. Ewan, just join them together. Is when I got to Memorial University, I had an experience. I'm not a person that scares easily. And I had an experience in speaking to 2 colleagues that literally scared me, because one of them said, this is not Ryerson. You cannot come here and talk about your anti-oppressive stuff. And a bunch of other things. I ran out of the meeting, picked up the phone, and tracked down Dr. Wanda Bernard. I think I was shaking. I don't know if you remember. I think I was shaking. I felt like a deer caught in a headlight. I just thought, what did I get myself into? She talked me off the ledge. No, let me not say that. She talked me down off the clouds, got my feet planted back on the ground, brushed me off, and sent me on my way. And then tried to connect me with somebody that she knew from Nova Scotia that was now at Memorial many times. That connection didn't happen. I think the person was also overwhelmed doing their own things. But the point is, the mentorship in, helping me through a very difficult situation, and then trying to connect me with people at the same time, and also try to bring me into ABSW. So you see the three-pronged approach, and all the time, sort of like, dusting me off every time and pushing me back out there kind of thing, right? That's academic mothering to me, right? We don't talk about it as much, maybe because we think mothering is negative or something like that, but that's kind of like what our mothers did to us before they sent us out into the world, where they knew that we were going to be brutalized, traumatized, and violated. So in comes Dr. Ewan. And I did a talk at OISE, and I think I scared almost everybody except her. And wouldn't you know, because I just laid it out. I said, as Black students, you do not have this, and this. You don't have the wiggle room to do this and this and this, because there's nobody to support you. You need to do it yourself. You need to, do X, Y, and Z and find people. And as I'm going down into the subway, here is then Anita. We stood in the subway, literally stood in the subway. We must have been there for like 40 minutes just talking. And so there is our relationship. But fast forward to her dissertation, and we're not going to get into the details, but I can say for me, as somebody who's been in the academy for a while, I was traumatized at what I saw happening to her, and I was traumatized at what was happening to me as well, with people around the table who in social work, in very high positions across the country, let's just say, and literally traumatized her. And when I reached out to help and asked people to help, they did not respond to me at all, and instead went back to Dr. Ewan, who was then a student. So you see how when we're talking about how anti-Black racism work, that's a little bird's eye view of how it works. So as a student, there she was trying to finish managing her personal life, and she was getting it, and I was there standing up like Dr. Senator Bernard Thomas stood up for me. I did not have a choice but to stand up and then to push as well, and to push everybody. I did not care who it was. And my thing was, I needed to see her through. So that's what anti-Black racism looks like. I know lots of questions came around about what to do and how to do, but there it is.
Thank you so much. And, we often talk about how the personal is political, and right before we were gathering, we were talking about how so much of what needs to be shared is not just cognitive, but is emotional, because it's about how we connect heart to heart. And it's so clear from your stories, your powerful stories, how much of your own hearts are involved in transforming the pain and the injustice that you have lived through, witnessed, and experienced, and that is part of the generational trauma that you carry into this book, into this new lens, into what Dr. Ewan has described as being able to transform the ways in which future clients can be seen and recognized for who they are. And it's clear that your relationships have played a very important role. And I saw in the chat, a lot of people are saying academic mothering, what a beautiful concept, and speaks to the importance of relationship to counter this. And even when we were talking about how to structure this session, do we use a PowerPoint, or do we honor the African values and principles and the relational approach? So I wonder if you all would feel comfortable sharing some of the other questions that came up around how can people in attendance help advocate for this approach? And I'm going to invite first our beloved senator.
Beloved senator. I like it, Dan. I like it. I just had a quick look at the attendees list, and I see many of my former students on that list. And that's wonderful. I would say that one of the things we need to do is we all have a role to play in bringing Afrocentric perspectives from margins to center. And so how do we do that? We do that by we share the book. We do that by, you could ask your agency to do a workshop on Africentric social work. A lot of the questions that people had sent in had to do with more specifics around the how to. And of course, you can't address those types of questions in a session like this. But first of all, we need a deep commitment to recognizing the dominance of Eurocentric perspectives in social work and an acceptance to looking at other perspectives. When we talk about Afrocentric perspectives, we're not just talking about perspectives that are for people of African descent only. We're really looking at African-centered social work. What does that mean, and how does that benefit anyone that we're working with? And we address some of those issues in the book. And I would say for those who want to learn more, there are certainly opportunities for you to do that, or you can create your own opportunity. We don't have to wait for an opportunity to come up. You can create your own, should that be your wish going forward. But seriously, I would say that one of the most important things is that movement. When I introduced the Africentric social work course back in 1999, I was afraid. I was afraid that no one would take it. I was afraid that people wouldn't want to take it. I was afraid that people would take it just because, they thought it was a quote unquote bird class that they could get through quickly and not have to worry too much. And I was absolutely amazed at what happened with that first cohort of about 30 students. And would you believe that one of those students, a white woman student, emailed me a few weeks ago when she saw me on the conversation I had with Senator Oliver on Lincoln Alexander Day, and still going back, she was taking me back to some of what she learned in that class back in 1999 and the impact that it's had on her career. So I think there's much that we can learn. There's much to learn about Afrocentric social work and bringing African-centered perspective into our work. And I would encourage people to look at opportunities to go deeper, to learn more, and to bring forward those plans so that we can really change the way that we provide services in social work. When we center clients' needs and clients' voices and clients' stories, we do better for the clients that we're working with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I was just thinking about the question, and to be quite honest, so when we received the list of questions that were coming in from the attendees, and this is just me being entirely transparent, I was a little bit troubled because to me, and I apologize if this is a misinterpretation, but I felt like we were being asked to validate the field of Afrocentric social work again. And, that a lot of the questions kind of, was like they were just questioning the validity of our work. Like the text is available and it's there, and I'm thinking about like when I was going through my studies and I was being taught, you know, different frameworks and different theories, the type of questions that I saw in the questions that were presented to us weren't the ones that I was asking as we would, and maybe once again, it's a misinterpretation, but I feel like, and this is just how we've been trained, but I just accepted what was taught to me as is. The information was presented to me. And although of course I was a critical thinker and I challenged a lot of my professors and things of that nature, I never really had to question like, how would I go about implementing what I've been taught into the field? So I think that it's like when people ask, like, how do I engage in Afrocentric social work, or how do we get our colleagues to accept this form of social work? I think that it's important that you say to them that the work is present, it's there. If you see African people as people, then why would you invalidate the framework that they need in order to help them, you know, do well or help them survive? And that would be a response that I would give to my colleagues. And once again, like, you know, the book is there. Dr. Mullings and Senator Bernard Thomas took such time and care into creating this amazing piece of work. So, you know, I would say the first step is to utilize the resources that have been presented to you. When I think about being a Black woman, I think that there's always two steps in, you know, facilitating knowledge. It's first validating that that my expertise is there and that I am a human that is capable of facilitating knowledge. And then I'm expected to teach the knowledge that I've already facilitated again. And it's tiring. It gets really, really tiring. So, you know, just use the resources that are there for you. And I would say, just don't doubt that the framework is valid. We're here, we're talking to you, we're letting you know that it's effective. And that's what comes to mind. I'm speaking from the heart. That's exactly how I would engage with my colleagues if they were to question how to implement this framework. And I just want to speak, because I don't know if anyone saw that I was getting emotional on camera. I just, as we sat in this session, when I was talking about the titles that I provide to Dr. Mullings, I don't know if Dr. Mullings knew I was afraid to give the title of mothering. And this is once again because of the fact that we are taught about, you know, particular titles that are respectful and that may be seen as negative, but that's exactly how I saw Dr. Mullings. I saw her as another mother. And, you know, what Dr. Mullings did in that time and moment was once again validate me, allowed me to know that it's okay to call her my mom at times. She's big sister and mom all in once. And I think that that's what the Afrocentric framework once again does for me. It allows me, it just makes me, it validates, you know, just me. And that's exactly what Dr. Mullings did throughout my doctorate. And it was such an emotional journey, but, you know, I never really took the time to kind of let it go. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe I needed this moment to just let it all go. So anyways, yeah, it's a very powerful framework, and it's just consistently working. It's working right now, even though maybe Dr. Mullings didn't intend for it to work at this moment, but I'm being vulnerable only to show, you know, why it's so important that this framework exists and why it should be implemented, because it's needed. There you go.
Well, you know, it's funny because the audience is blessed with 3 generations of mighty Black women in this space and time. Truly, truly, like I mean, the smile, I'm watching the smile on the senator's face, and I'm watching kind of like the smile and Dr. Ewan's face, and I know that I'm smiling too. And wait, yeah, but you know, and I'm like just the pride in talking about Afrocentric social work, and what we are actually doing is some of the questions that came is demonstrating how it actually works. This is like as good a practice explanation that you'll ever get. And even the pieces around, around Dr. Ewan saying, I'm just being transparent, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just me. It's actually not you. And I know that you're sure that some of the questions that came really questioned and asked us to validate Africentric social work with one question within 1 hour. And so that, and I mean, I can be transparent too. I can share that I had, once I read them, I thought, whoa, this is pretty prescriptive. We're not able to do that. This is a discussion and not a workshop or a seminar. This is just to share. And part of the sharing is to honor the African way of being in being a culture or a groups of people from different cultures that, share knowledge or transfer knowledge verbally. And so that's part of what we're doing is Africentric social work in talking. Because when you actually are doing the work, you've heard Dr. Ewan said that she's had to, explain this. And I know this is an experience that all of us have heard before, but now we're talking about from an Afrocentric point of view, is that she's had to explain. And when you have to explain from a Black perspective, it's very different than when you have to explain from a perspective that lots of people understand and know already. So when questions about, well, why do you want to use this, and why can't, this person look after your children, or if you have this kind of money, why can't you buy this? That's very particular. When you know the context and the circumstances, very particular. Some of those questions, when you're working with Black participants, they're very particular to Black people and no one else. Absolutely no one else. So that's the thing to consider, is that when you're practicing or you're trying to practice from an Afrocentric point of view, is that your learning curve or your practice curve may be pretty steep, but also it has to be consistent, it has to be deliberate. And doing this one talk, this 1 hour, or doing a workshop for 2 hours, that will not do it. Because if you remember, social work told you that in order to practice, you needed to do a BSW. If you want to practice at a different level, you need to do an MSW. And if you want to practice yet at a different level, you need to do a PhD. How many years of practice is that? So please consider that when you're talking or thinking about Afrocentric social work practice, is that you actually need to put the time in. And part of that, in respecting and honoring the practice, is do the very basic by reading some literature. Because if you don't have the book, there are lots of pieces of literature now about Afrocentric social work. But do get the book, because we set you up very nicely and sweetly in what Afrocentric social work is in the very first chapter. If you're not able to read anything else, read that piece, because that's going to be your anchor as you launch yourself or try to improve yourself. Okay, that was quite long. All right, stop now.
Can I just jump in and add a couple of other things? So first of all, let me just say there's a whole body of work on mothering and other mothering in our communities. So we need to use that work as important, and we need to showcase that work more as well. I want to say to people that are on the call and that may be listening to it after the fact, when we talk about the fact that anyone can learn and practice Afrocentric social work, we do so with some caution. And the caution would be, we don't want people to appropriate. And so the learning has to be deep learning and deep commitment to working with Afrocentric theoretical perspectives. So working with those, how we can integrate those in our practice, but doing the work. It's a journey. if we think about this more as a journey and not as a destination, there are so many experiences when I think about the challenges. One of the challenges that I've experienced is someone appropriating the knowledge based on having a 3-hour lecture in one of my classes, and then wanting and expecting to do some work with that in a way that was so offensive that it was so troubling. I'm just speechless remembering, what happened in that moment. It was when I first started introducing Africentric perspectives. I would do one lecture out of 12 in my classes that I was offering. Barely introducing. And someone literally took that and ran with it. That's not what we want you to do. like, please don't do that. We want you to be interested. We want you to be open to the learning, and we want you to engage in the learning. We want you to engage in a learning journey. And part of that learning journey is decolonizing. So the decolonizing of our minds, and we're through the Truth and Reconciliation report and recommendations, we've been encouraged to do that in terms of Indigenous communities. And what we're saying is we need to do the same for people of African descent as well. So that decolonization of our minds has to happen before you can truly engage then in learning. So the unlearning has to happen while you're doing the learning, and it needs to be a deep, deep, deep commitment from a place of humility, and not speaking for or running ahead of us, but walking alongside of us in doing that work. But I wanted, the stories about you two and your mentorship reminded me of when I first met Dr. Mullings, who was a PhD student. I was then director at the Dalhousie School of Social Work, and at our annual conference, the deans and directors of schools across the country always hosted a reception for doctoral students. And I noticed that there weren't many deans and directors approaching Dr. Delores Mullings at that time. But I made a beeline to her. I wanted to know who she was. I wanted to know what she was studying, what her research interest was. And I also wanted to recruit her to teach at the Dalhousie School of Social Work, which I did. We were doing both our programs online way before any of the other schools across the country were doing so. And she became one of our faculty members online. Tried to get her full-time at Dal, mind you, but Memorial managed to snatch her up. But I remember that moment. And I remember recognizing the fact that I had to reach out to her, not wait for her to come to me and do the rounds. And I could see, my colleagues were doing the rounds, but they were doing the rounds past her, not to her, because she wasn't seen as a potential draw. Those receptions weren't just to feel good reception. Let's go and meet the PhD students. Hello, how are you? How are you doing? Those were who can be the next person that we can invite to apply for a tenure track position. So the racism runs so deep in our field. It almost makes me want to weep to think about the fact that I saw that happening with her, and then she saw it happening with you. But clearly we've done that mentorship piece to make a difference. But we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't be fighting against the grain. We shouldn't be fighting anti-Black racism in all aspects of our work, and certainly not in social work, in a field that's meant to be upholding and working with people who are marginalized. We work with the most vulnerable in our society, and yet we treat people in this way. We need a reshift, a whole paradigm shift in the social work profession, including social work education. We hope that this book can contribute to some of that. and a reminder as to why that's important. And I want to commend every one of the authors and every editor who's contributed to this book. You have no idea of this place in history. 50 years from now, someone will be writing and talking about this. I won't be here to see it, mind you, but it will happen.
So we have some requests. Where can we purchase this book? And Rebecca has just put in a link. And also we are going to be offering some of the books as part of our celebration of Social Work Month, as part of our own commitment to working to increase access and understanding to marginalized voices, or historically marginalized voices. Hopefully we are working to make sure that they are front and center, as they always should have been. And actually our beloved senator is going to be leading, sharing some research on an Afrocentric lens to understanding interpersonal violence. It's going to be a day-long conference on March 4th, which will help kick off Social Work Month. So hopefully this is just the beginning of encouraging our members to get more involved in learning. But it's been so touching. We have only about 7 minutes left. It's been so moving to be invited into like a window into your relationships with one another. And so first I want to thank you for your profound vulnerability and transparency, and really touching our hearts to see the power of relationship, which is at the core of how I want to believe we can transform this world and this community within which we live and work. In our final 6 minutes, are there any closing comments that you all would want to share with those attending? And I don't know who wants to go first.
You were like, sort of like, I'll go first. I'll go first. So I really want to pick up on the piece from Senator Bernard Thomas about resisting the actions of appropriation. We know that happens often, and we know that happens, well, all the time. And we've seen it happen already in social work profession and schools of social work. Because the thing that we know is that lots of people want to be Black or want to behave as if they're Black for social commentary, but they actually don't understand what it's like to be Black. So just that cautious, just 2 pieces of cautiousness. The other thing for me is the relationship that we have is absolutely wonderful, fabulous, supportive. It doesn't mean that we have not had to work through tensions. That's a part of how we do this as family as well. And so nothing is perfect, but what works for us is that the journey of connecting and ironing things out makes us stronger. And so we're able to transfer that or some of those pieces to others. So just we don't don't want to create anything that looks like utopia. And the final thing I want to say is this: our people are dying. This is no joke. You might not be surgeons. Social workers and social work educators are not surgeons in terms of physical using a knife, but we are surgeons in a different way. And we can kill or we can help to cure. And right now, our people are dying in spite the work that Senator Wanda Bernard has done, the newer work that myself, Dr. Ewan has done, and some of the other work, Dr. S, Dr., that people are doing in our communities. We're taking charge, we're showing our agency. Our people are still dying because the statistics are still showing us that we're dying, because everyone around us in every institution still doesn't understand that our lives are based on lies and the foundations of anti-Black racism. We're not suggesting that this book is also going to be the be all and end all of everything. It does not work for every Black person, and it will not work for every practitioner. But it's an encouragement for you to do the absolute best that you can in the classroom as educators, if you're even teaching part-time, and as practitioners, because our people's lives depend on it. And if you're white, I just want to say we cannot do this without you. Whether you're, now to be clear, just stretching it, whether you're pink, white, Black, whatever the race, gender, wherever you live, we cannot do it without you, because this work is for all of us. And as Senator Wanda Bernard Thomas says, we're looking for partners to do this with us, because we mean for our people to thrive and survive. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ewan, Senator, any closing reflections?
Dr. Ewan, do you want to go next, please?
I don't really, I think Dr. Mullings wrapped things up beautifully. The only thing that I can say is that I'm a testament to the fact that Africentric social work works. I was a teenage mom, and because of the social workers who used elements of Africentric social work of a variety of races, I was able to pull through a lot of my challenges. So we do need your support, and we do need to be a community when it comes to saving the lives of Black people. And I'm hoping that we've inspired you to take part in this very important work today.
So I would echo what both of you have said. And I'll just close with one further comment. And that would be that being involved in this work is really helps to sustain me. It helps me to keep going when it's really, really difficult to do so. And it gives me such critical hope. And part of that critical hope lies in others joining the work, being part of the struggle. And so I invite you all to be a part of it in some way. Find your place. Thank you.
Thank you so very much to each of you. Thank you also to everyone in attendance. We are going to be providing this video available afterwards, and the book as well. And hopefully you will be joining us for some of our many Social Work Month events, especially March 4th. Mark your calendar to see how an Afrocentric lens can inform research and service and policy advocacy, because we're going to include all of those things in our conference. And also Dalhousie has a wonderful session that is happening tonight. I believe that it was put in the chat as well. We are so grateful to each of you for coming to speak and sharing not only a little bit about the book, but about the journey, the process, the inspiration, the relationships, the wisdom, and really touching our hearts. And I believe firmly that when our hearts are touched and we can connect to one another, we can move mountains. And there's mountains, unfortunately, still ahead and upon us that must be moved. And so thank you for inviting us into your journey with this small window that hopefully will inspire everyone to take many more classes. I know that I am eager to plan as many as I can with you all for our professional development for our social workers. And with that, thank you all so much.